Dorothy Brown says she got into tax law because she didn't want to deal with race at work. She's a black woman academic from the South Bronx. She says she faced racism every day of her life. So when it came to choosing a career, she went with math because numbers. I mean, with numbers, there's no way that something that's as straightforward and numerical as the tax system could deal with race, right? Well, Dorothy Brown says, quote, "I've never been so wrong about something in my life." After getting her law degree and then her master's in tax law, Brown was helping her parents with their taxes when she noticed something odd. Now, they were married, but they didn't seem to benefit from the tax breaks that one should expect to see from a married couple. Dorothy Brown dug in and quickly discovered that the IRS does not collect or publish data for race the same way they do for gender or for age. So that caused Brown to begin to dig deeper and deeper. She says she became a detective, looking at the history of different tax laws. She looked at who benefits from most tax breaks and loopholes and who doesn't. Take her parents' marriage examples. Now, marriage tax cuts only benefit single-wage earner households or couples where one worker makes significantly more than the other. So, for example, a household where both spouses work and make similar incomes, they're not going to get the tax cut. And as it turns out, households with equal earners that have two full-time workers, they're more likely to be black. And then, by contrast, household where there is a single wage earner, where one spouse can afford to stay home and not work, those are significantly more likely to be white. Now, through arduous study and research, Brown uncovered a long list of ways that both tax law and the many other systems that impact wealth generation tend to favor white Americans and also disadvantage black Americans. In her book, The Whiteness of Wealth, How the Tax System Impoverishes Black Americans and How We Can Fix It, was published in 2021. Since then, Brown has been appointed to the Treasury Advisory Committee on Racial Equity under Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen. Brown and her other committee co-members have made recommendations on how to address racial equity matters within the tax code. She recently said in an interview with NPR that despite the board's work and recommendations, quote, "We have not seen much progress at all." Joining me now is Dorothy Brown, professor of law at Georgetown University and member on the Advisory Committee on Racial Equity at the Department of the Treasury. Good morning. Thank you so much for being here. Dorothy, you said in an interview with NPR's Marketplace recently that you haven't seen a whole lot of interest in just this conversation about centering race and racial equity within the Treasury. Why do you think that is?
Because Treasury doesn't see racial equity as something that they should be focusing on. They haven't historically. They give lip service to it under Secretary Yellen. But when the Treasury Advisory Committee makes recommendations like you should really have a path forward on collecting data by race, because you shouldn't depend on an academic like Dorothy Brown to uncover the racial biases in our tax code. There's a Stanford study that came out last year that showed if you were Black and you filed for the Earned Income Tax Credit, you were 3 to 5 times more likely to be audited than if you were non-Black. That needs to be fleshed out. The Treasury should be at the forefront of this. We made the recommendation in March of last year, and we have seen very little progress. Data is critical. The IRS and Treasury publish a lot of data about a lot of things, but not about race. And I'm very disappointed in Secretary Yellen not moving our recommendations forward faster.
This is such an important conversation because there are so many of us within our community, within Black America, who feel like there are things systemically that hold us back or that are pressing on us in different ways, but we can't prove it. We can't point to it. So when you bring up the notion of data, I just want to underscore how valuable and imperative that is. Dorothy, you're a friend to Velshi and the show, and you spoke to Ali about 3 years ago, and you said that one of the things that was most important there was for the IRS to collect and to publish data on race, the same way they do with age and gender. And President Biden's racial equity order back in 2021 that actually affirmed that. From a policy place, what do you think has to happen in order to bring that into a reality? Is the pressure to be applied in the Treasury? Is it to be applied to legislatures? Is it a combination of both? Or do you think it's in the courts where this needs to be fought?
No, it's very simple. The White House needs to pick up the phone and tell Treasury Secretary Yellen they meant what they said in the racial equity order, and they expect progress on the Treasury Advisory Committee's recommendations forthwith. It's not complicated. We have a path forward. We recommended how to get it done. And the White House needs to step up and say, we meant it. We need disaggregated data by race in the Treasury and IRS. We have it at HUD. We have it at the Department of Labor. We know how many people ride bicycles by race, but we don't know how taxpayers pay their taxes by race. It is a sin and a shame.
I'm glad you brought up those examples of other places in government that are already doing this, because what it does is that it eliminates the argument that, well, we don't ever do this. We never sort of look at these statistics. The fact that there are models that exist across other agencies is so critical for building a model that is consistent across all government agencies. Back in 2020,
I actually call it Treasury's exceptionalism. They are the outlier here.
Well, that's important to point out, and I'm glad you did. Back in 2020, there were a lot of folks from different communities, a lot of white Americans, for example, who had questions about how to show up, how to be allies. And right now, you've said that it's important for white Americans to engage with the subject of racism and wealth accumulation and racism in the tax system as well. You've mentioned that this sort of allyship is helpful and impactful for white Americans to be forthcoming about in terms of intergenerational wealth and about their experiences with wealth building. This is not done to shame anyone for what they've been able to achieve, but to help illuminate the issues around disparities. Can you talk about how critical this piece of allyship is for people who are invested in building greater equity?
It's very important because you may be sitting you're a Black employee, you may be sitting at the cubicle next to your white colleague, and your white colleague is sending their children with the same salary, which is a big assumption based on race in the labor market, but with the same salary, your next door cubicle person can send their kids to private school, lives in a really nice house, and you're like, how come I can't make it work? You, Black employee, if you're a college grad, you're more likely to send money to your parents. Your white peer is more likely to get money from their parents. And if white Americans talk more about this hidden form of wealth, what I call interfamily transfers, then Black Americans see we're not doing anything wrong. We've got a tax system that we are paying for, but that are stripping us of wealth. We have a Treasury Secretary that doesn't seem to want to move the ball forward. And we have this intergenerational wealth advantage that white Americans have that often don't want to talk about. But I will say, Charles, since my book came out, I've gotten emails from white Americans telling me their story and saying, I want to be an ally. And let me tell you how my whiteness helped me financially.
Dorothy Brown, thank you so much for your important work.
Insects. Relinquish what remains of the Allspark.
So who's the insect? You? What? Who's the insect?
Protect you. They were defeated on our world, and we will defeat them here.
Ambush was just a diversion. Security teams bring up. Rabbit, she's already inside. Deeds! Give me an update on that reserve. What's readiness? What was his name? What was it?
Evac, sir.
Right, evac.
She's right in front.
We're facing a heavy sustained attack. They appear to be after the Allspark craft. General! General! Need to immediately hold on. National security advisor. Stay down. Check it out. The mission celebration for the amateur suicide mission.